attention, please. Welcome to this fellowship dinner event tonight. I think most of you know each other. It's really good that you've been mingling and getting to know one another. One of the benefits of these nights is that is the social interaction that occurs. Tonight we're very privileged to have Harold Schmautz give a talk on what's happening in Europe. Harold's originally from Germany. He's been in Australia since 2000. Harold is, as am I, a monarchist, and has sort of dedicated his life as a vocation to monarchy, which I think is a worthy cause. But what's happening in Europe is very important, and we read a lot about what's happening in Europe in the newspapers, but sometimes we don't know really what's going on. We don't know what's going on below the surface. And there's no doubt there are undercurrents in Europe that we don't quite understand. That's why Brexit happened and we're surprised, and could Marine Le Pen win the presidency in France. I wouldn't be surprised, because we shouldn't be surprised. It's surprising we're not going to be surprised. So without any further ado, I'd like to please ask that you make Harold feel welcome as he gives his address. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for the invitation. Thank you, David. I hope I can give you a little bit more information about what's going on in Europe. This is my point of view, and as I said this evening, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't look into the future. I have no idea how the elections will end up. At the moment, I think populism will not win in Europe, but I might be proven wrong. So this evening's topic had no question mark. Europe 2017, populism ante portas. It should have a question mark, I think, because populism is a fashionable term, but is it a winning movement in Europe? Before the turn of the century, or the millennium, it was hardly part of the political radar. And if it was linked to bourgeoisism in France in the 1950s. We'll come back to that later. Before World War II, populism was connected to fascism, or fascist movements, and after the war, partly with the communist parties. It is significant that with the diminishing communist parties, populist parties on the right grew, like the Front National in France or Forza Italia in Italy, and with this party shrinking, a new populist party sprang up in Italy, Pepe Grillo's five-star movement. First, let's have a look what the dictionary says about the term populism, so we know what we are talking about. Populism is a political doctrine that proposes that the common people are exploited by a privileged elite and which seeks to resolve this. The underlying ideology of populists can be left, right, or center. Its goal is uniting the uncorrupt and unsophisticated little man against the corrupt, dominant elites, usually the established politicians, and their camp of followers, usually the rich and the intellectuals. It is guided by the belief that political and social goals are best achieved by direct actions of the masses, therefore calls for referenda are high and popular in their agenda. In the second decade of the 21st century, it became a pejorative term, often used with the adjective right-wing. However, not every right-wing group or political organization could be automatically termed populist, nor is the political left immune against populism. Let's start with the Netherlands. 2 weeks ago, the Dutch went to the polls. The result was generally considered a setback for the populists in Europe. Geert Wilders' party, Party for the Vrijheid, Party for Freedom or Freedom Party, did not manage to become the biggest party in the Dutch parliament. Prime Minister Mark Rutte's Liberal Party, VVD, held on to the number 1 position with 33 seats, despite a loss of 8 seats. The Geert Wilders party, BBB, gained 5 seats and has now 20 seats in the House, in the lower house. And there are a total of 150 seats. So these two parties have about a third. To form a government, a coalition of several parties is needed, with at least 76 seats. And this morning I watched the Dutch news and I saw that 4 parties are trying to negotiate a coalition government. That is the Mark Rutte's VVD, the Liberal Party called D66, the Greens, and the Christian Democrats. All together would be with about 80 seats. But the Greens have never been in a Dutch government, so it's very difficult to deal with them. The PVV was never near that crucial number of 76 seats. And even if the PVV should manage to find support among smaller parties, like the anti-EU party FVD, Forum for Democracy, it was never anywhere near Wilders' aim to form a government. Geert Wilders' crusade against Islam and the EU is vocal and certainly attracts a lot of attention inside and outside the Netherlands. Partly because he uses the internet and partly also because of his travels abroad. He has been in the USA and in Australia. And the demonstrators guarantee that the media have a field day. Besides his anti-Islam policy, his party's program is only populist in the sense that it appeals to the have-nots, who feel the welfare system in the Netherlands offer to all citizens and are exploited by the foreigners, namely those from Morocco and Turkey. Geert Wilders has in his party portfolio also an anti-EU stand. After the United Kingdom voted in a referendum in June 2016 to leave the European Union, it's called Brexit, in the Netherlands the term Nexit came into use. For a founding member of the EU like the Netherlands, this was new, and it has more financial than ideological reasons. With the financial crisis in 2009 and the bailout packages for Ireland, Portugal, Spain, and especially for Greece, the anti-EU agenda gained ground in the Netherlands. It's not surprising that this is reflected in the PVV's party program, which demands withdrawal from the European Union, return to the guilder, the old Dutch currency, instead of the use of the euro, abolition of the European Parliament, and no cooperation with any EU activity. Wilders would ask the EU to remove the Dutch star from the European flag, which is nonsense because the flag was there before the EU was created. Repeal flight tax and carbon dioxide tax. That's very similar to what's happening here. A binding referendum on subjects like the EU and a multicultural society. It is important to note that Geert Wilders, once a member of Mark Rutte's Liberal VVD, has a predecessor in his anti-Islamic stand, Pim Fortuyn. This very colorful politician, once a Marxist and a member of the Social Democratic PvdA, the Labour Party, had provoked controversy with his outspoken views about multiculturalism, immigration, and Islam. He called Islam a backward culture and was quoted saying that if it were legally possible, he would close the borders for Muslim immigrants. Trump must have read that. He fiercely rejected being called a right-wing populist. Pim Fortuyn was openly homosexual and a brilliant speaker. His style could be best compared to Milo Yiannopoulos in the USA, who fought for Donald Trump and was a star on the Breitbart media. Fortuyn founded his own party, Pim Fortuyn List, LPF, on the 11th of February 2002. Fortuyn explained that I have no desire to go through the emancipation of women and homosexuals all over again. In May 2002, he was shot dead by Volker van der Graaf, who claimed he murdered Fortuyn to stop him from exploiting Muslims as scapegoats and targeting the weak members of society in seeking political power. Nevertheless, Fortuyn's party had an election success after his assassination and gained 26 seats 6 weeks later. The MPs joined a coalition government with the Christian Democrats, but infighting led to the quick disappearance in the 2006 elections. The vacuum was to be filled by the PVV. This party's history began with Geert Wilders' departure from the VVD in September 2004. Wilders did not accept the VVD's position on the EU offering Turkey to join the EU as a full member. Wilders continued to sit in parliament as a one-man party, Groep Wilders Group. It won 9 seats in the 2006 general election, attracting many Pim Fortuyn voters who had become homeless after the self-destruction of his party. In the 2010 general election, the PVV won 24 seats, making it the 3rd largest party. Since early 2012, according to the program it presented for the elections a few months later in September, it strongly advocates withdrawal from the EU. So that is comparatively new. It's in the development of the party, or Geert Wilders' party. It's still a party with only 1 member. Nobody can join the party. Geert Wilders has this party, is the party. Wilders is not only a controversial figure because of his anti-Islam agenda, he has been highly critical of what he called former Queen Beatrix's multi-culti leanings. He reacted angrily to the 2007 Christmas speech given by Queen Beatrix. In her speech, she pleaded for tolerance, which Mr. Wilders saw as an attack on his party, or worse, on him personally. In the years to follow, Geert Wilders pursued his aim to strip the monarch of all political powers. In his opinion, the head of state should stick to cutting ribbons and stay well away from politics. With the help of the left-wing parties of the Dutch parliament, he abolished the monarch's right to appoint a formateur, who looked for suitable coalition partners after the elections and who might be willing to form a coalition government. Since his accession to the throne, King Willem-Alexander has not received the party leaders or appointed a formateur. We have this situation now after the elections, and there is a formateur, but she is no longer appointed by the monarch. And I find it astonishing that the left parties, who always oppose Geert Wilders in any other field, cooperate with him in disrupting the monarch's position. However, in the Dutch parliament, Geert Wilders remains one of the most ferocious anti-monarchists, although he swore allegiance to King Willem-Alexander after the oath-taking ceremony in parliament, when every MP was called up by name and gave a personal reassurance of his or her loyalty to the new king. I watched it live on the internet and I was waiting for his reaction, but he didn't hesitate. He swore allegiance to the king. His anti-monarchy attitude alone will prevent him from becoming a majority leader, since more than 75% of the Dutch stay loyal to the monarchy. Most of his voters are not supporting his stance against King Willem-Alexander or personal attacks on Argentinian-born Queen Maxima, who is the most popular member of the Dutch royal family. Queen Maxima reached a score of 7.7 out of 10, followed by Queen Beatrix, 7.4, and the King, 7.3. Geert Wilders' criticism of the EU is shared by other parties with whom he allied in the European Parliament. The Front National in France, the Alternative für Deutschland, AfD in Germany, the Freiheitliche Partei Österreichs, FPÖ, the Lega Nord, or the Movimento Cinque Stelle, in the five-star movement in Italy. United in their EU skepticism, these parties form a common faction in the European Parliament, named Europe of Nations and Freedom, in French, Europe des Nations et de Liberté, ENL, that's the abbreviation according to the French name. That organized a congress in January 2017 in the German city of Koblenz, where for the first time Geert Wilders, Marine Le Pen of the Front National, Frauke Petry of the AfD, and Matteo Salvini of the Northern League were on stage together. A couple of years earlier, Marine Le Pen had said she would never be on the same stage as Geert Wilders, but this year she joined him. Especially Marine Le Pen, with her top position in the French opinion polls, is desperate to gain recognition as a potential head of state. Let's have a closer look to France and to the Le Pen family. This year, the candidates list comprises 9 men and 2 women. One candidate less than 5 years ago. And you have all the typical parties, the conservatives, they call themselves now les Républicains, the socialists, and Mélenchon from the Communist Party, etc. At the moment, opinion polls give Marine Le Pen a slight lead over the other 10 candidates. Being the frontrunner with up to 28% does not mean Marine Le Pen will be France's next president. Her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, came second in 2002, but in the runoff with Jacques Chirac, Le Pen received only 17.8%. In the past 15 years, the election base of the Front National could be broadened, but the party is still in a minority position. This was demonstrated in December 2015, when in the first round of the regional elections, the FN was ahead in 6 regions, but in the end did not win a single region, due to the fact that conservatives and socialists formed coalitions, so-called Front Républicain, Republican fronts, and urged voters to vote for each other. That cost the Front National the election success in the end. Fact is, the Front National has only a few allies. Those who support the Front's political agenda vote straight for the party and not for others. In a runoff, the FN is usually left alone against all others. When Jean-Marie Le Pen took part in a presidential election for the first time in 1974, he received only 190,000 votes, or 0.75%. In his last presidential race in 2007, he received 3.8 million French men and women who voted for him, or 10.44%. The politician who was born in 1928 has been in politics all his life. In 1956, he was elected to the Assemblée Nationale as a member of Pierre Poujade, that's the name again from the beginning, Union de Défense des Commerçants et Artisans, Defense Union of Shop Owners and Craftsmen, UDCA. The UDCA became a stereotype for a right-wing populist movement. Poujade was a supporter of Marshal Pétain and was therefore an outcast after the war. He became the owner of a bookshop and a stationery store. In July 1953, with a group of about 20 people, Poujade prevented inspectors of the tax board from verifying the income of another shopkeeper. This was the start of a tax protest movement by shopkeepers, which led to the formation of his party. This movement would soon be called Poujadisme. Poujadisme flourished most vigorously in the last years of the Fourth Republic and articulated the economic interests and grievances of shopkeepers and other proprietor managers of small businesses facing economic and social change. The main themes of Poujadisme concerned the defense of the common man against the elites, as said in the beginning. In addition to the protest against the income tax and the price control imposed by Finance Minister Antoine Pinay, to limit inflation, bourgeoisism was opposed to industrialization, urbanization, and American-style modernization, which were perceived as a threat to the identity of rural France. Bourgeoisism denounced the French state as rapeteux et inhumain, thieving and inhumane. Does it sound familiar? The movement's common man, bourgeois populism, led to the anti-parliamentarian party. Bourgeois called the Assemblée Nationale the biggest brothel in Paris, and the deputies a pile of rubbish and pederasts. And it became strongly anti-intellectual. In 1955, the UDCA was a strong political movement with 400,000 members. Its adherents were encouraged to protest against taxes and withdraw their deposits from state-owned banks. The UDCA secured 52 seats in the 1956 elections. The youngest member of the parliament elected on the UDCA list was Jean-Marie Le Pen, then leader of the youth branch of the UDCA. He earned his wings in the Bourgeois group, but in 1962, Le Pen lost his seat at the assembly when the Bourgeois group became irrelevant. It was the time of Charles de Gaulle and his party. He dominated the conservatives and the right wings. So, what happened to Le Pen afterwards? Le Pen was without an income from politics and created the SERB firm, Société d'études et de relations publiques, a company involved in the music industry, which produced records both of the communist CGT, that's the trade union, songs of the Popular Front, and Nazi marches. Everything that brought money. The firm was condemned in 1968 for praise of war crime and complicity after the diffusion of songs from the Third Reich. In 1972, Le Pen became politically active again and founded the FN. And as I said before, in 1974, he was a presidential candidate. So in the 2 years, he built up his party. Nowadays, the aging Jean-Marie Le Pen has more or less retired from active politics, although still appears in public and at rallies, provocating with radical stirs and Nazi references. He did not stand in the 2012 elections, but left the place to his daughter, Marine. She polled 7.9%, or 6.4 to 1,000 votes in the first round, and finished in the 3rd position behind François Hollande and the incumbent president Nicolas Sarkozy. Her national result was higher in percentage and in votes than those of Jean-Marie Le Pen in 2002, and also in his last effort in 2007. But the FN had difficulties finding funding because of the opposition of every French bank to her political platform, and most banks still have a board member appointed by the government. This led the FN borrowing 9 million euros from the first Czech-Russian bank in Moscow in 2014, even as the EU placed sanctions on Russia for annexing Crimea. In February 2016, the FN asked Russia for another loan. This time, the amount was 27 million euros. Russia obviously follows her rise with sympathy, if not more. In a 2016 interview with the BBC, Marine Le Pen stated that Donald Trump's presidential victory will in fact help her in the 2006-2007 presidential race. In her opinion, Mr. Trump has made possible what previously had been presented as impossible. She officially launched her candidacy on 4th and 5th of February this year, while she is predicted to be the frontrunner with then 25%, at the moment 28%, explaining the national and international attention she attracted. Le Pen promised a referendum in which the nation should decide whether to withdraw from the EU or to reintroduce the franc and leave the euro. For the first time, Le Pen met with several incumbent heads of state, including Lebanon's Michel Aoun, Chad's Idriss Debry, and Russia's Vladimir Putin on the 24th of March, after two secret meetings in 2014 and 2015. So, she obviously has the support of Putin, but will it materialize in votes? That is rather doubtful. Opposed to free trade and autarky, she advocates protectionism as a median way. She has expressed support for the French public utilities, the civil servants, and the general public's interest. She is a strong opponent of the euro and advocates France to leave the common currency. She asserts that despite the expansion of the abilities of the European Financial Stability Facility, reassuring announcements and new austerity plans, Greece is sinking, social devastation is intensifying, and the anger of the people bursts out. In July 2011, she claimed that, quote, after the 17 billions of the first Greek bailout plan, the 15 billions of the new assistance plan to Greece will make heavy our own already huge debt. Marine Le Pen seeks to establish a moratorium on legal immigration. During a press conference on the 21st of February 2011, she unveiled, quote, the 2010 real figure of immigration based on data transmitted by high-ranking officials of the Ministry of the Interior, detailed the welfare benefits to which the legal and illegal immigrants are entitled, and proposed concrete solutions based on working models in the UK and the Netherlands. In July 2011, she claimed that with 203,000 residence permits allocated in 2010 versus 114,000 in 2000 under Lionel Jospin, the UMP, that's the Conservative power, promotes a laxer than ever policy on immigration. She said that the filiation, i.e. by family, should be the norm route to French nationality. Only children born by French parents can become French nationals, with naturalization the exception. At the moment it is like in the USA, everybody born in France has the French nationality. That's why we have the situation in Mayotte, that's a small island east of Madagascar that seceded from the Comores when the Comore Islands became independent. The Comore women now go to Mayotte, give birth to their child, and the child has French nationality, and then they go back to the Comore to later come back and claim French nationality for the whole family. That's criticized by Marine Le Pen. In her view, naturalization can only be obtained after a check on the ability of assimilation to Republican principles. In order to settle the immigration issue, she advocates a reform of the nationality regulations so as to remove dual citizenship and the automatic acquisition of French nationality. On 30th of May 2011, she wrote a letter to the members of the parliament about dual citizenship, saying that in the dual citizenship lie one of the main ferments of the breach of the Republican cohesion that France needs more than ever, and a potent break on the assimilation of the French people from immigration. She favors French first policy with regard to employment, welfare, and accommodation. Advocating that the FN remains a non-dominational party, Marine Le Pen regularly states her attachment to secularism, laïcité, in French society. She vigorously defends the 1905 French law on the separation of churches and the state, stipulating that the French Republic does not recognize, grant a salary to, or subsidize any form of religious worship. She favors a ban on any communitarian or religious demands in school, and seeks an amendment to the Constitution stating that the French Republic does not recognize any community, denomination, or ethnic group. Opposed to the financing of mosques from public funds, she further seeks to deny their financing from foreign assets. In her view, the Constitution construction, maintenance, and financing of places of worship should be a matter for groups of worshippers operating within a regulated framework. She advocates to implement the separation of the mosque and the state, and opposes the training of imams by the French Republic. In an interview in June 2011, she said that unlike the leader of the PVV, Geert Wilders, she is not waging war against Islam and is fighting the Islamization of French society. Emphasizing her divergence with the Dutch, she claimed, "That's the difference between Geert Wilders and me. He reads the Quran literally. You can't interpret the Quran or the Bible literally. I resist fundamentalists who want to impose their will and the law on France. Sharia law is not compatible with our principles, our values, or democracy." Marine Le Pen's opponents in France have the disadvantage that their parties are discredited by a lot of scandals. The conservative François Fillon employed his wife and children as assistants in parliament, although nobody can remember having seen them. The socialist Benoît Hamon, who was elected in a primary, has a radical program that even large sections of his own party, including former Prime Minister Manuel Valls, refute. Manuel Valls declared 2 days ago that he is supporting Emmanuel Macron. Moderate socialists, center politicians, and free market advocates support former socialist economy minister Emmanuel Macron. He created a movement, En Marche, forward, a political movement which is just an instrument to run his campaign. He is not fielding candidates for the legislative elections, which will take place a fortnight after the second round of the presidential elections. This could in the end prevent many French from voting for him, because he would be a president without a presidential majority in the Assemblée Nationale. How should he be able to pass the laws he is propagating in his electoral campaign? He would soon realize, like Donald Trump, that the president is only as strong as Parliament is willing to follow his agenda. Another strong candidate with about 14% in the opinion polls is Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who is supported by the communists, left-wing socialists, many Greens, and anti-capitalist groups. His campaign is not without populist approach and reminds of the 1950s and 60s when the powerful Communist Party ruled the streets with their rented crowds. The field of five more or less equally strong candidates, according to the published opinion polls, which may not be correct, leaves a couple of options open. However, the least likely is Marine Le Pen winning in the end. Despite France being in recession and in limbo, the dissatisfaction with the EU, the euro, or the political class is not big enough that a majority would vote for Marine Le Pen. And her father's shadow hangs over her, despite the fact that he had been expelled from the Front National in 2015. He was initially suspended back in May 2015 after he repeated his view that the Holocaust was a detail of history. He has taken legal action against his expulsion. Marine Le Pen has given the Front National a friendly, a female face, but Jean-Marie is the evil spirit that will not go away. As long as he is alive and giving interviews to papers and TV stations, he will interfere his daughter's campaign and will damage her electoral efforts. It's a bit like in Germany, where the new party, Alternative für Deutschland, Alternative for Germany, is haunted by internal fights. But before I go into details what's going on nowadays, let me introduce you to the youngest party this evening. In September 2012, a former state secretary in Hesse, that's a state, a land in German, a professor for economy, and the former editor of the important daily newspaper Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, founded the political group Electoral Alternative 2013. In German, Wahlalternative 2013. And it was founded to oppose the German federal policies concerning the Eurozone crisis. Their manifesto was endorsed by 68 economists, journalists and business leaders, half of whom were professors, and 3/4 of whom had academic degrees. The group stated that the Eurozone had proven